San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. Portland labeling us anarchist jurisdictions for some reason. But do you really know what anarchy even is? This recent New York Times article is really awful. It doesn't explain anarchy at all. But I would like to show it just to show terrible explanation of anarchism. So, oops, now I'm a huge person. I really want to show this article. This is really bad. If you read this article, do not see this as a lesson of anarchism. It's really terrible. This is the truth about today's anarchists. This is not the truth at all. Just breaking stuff and fucking shit up.
Breaking news. This article is bullshit.
So this is pretty much a photographer who dresses. He sees people breaking shit. He decides to dress up as them and break stuff with them. And he says, "Wow, this is insurrectional anarchism." So this is what he calls this. But the problem is that this is not world building. This doesn't like give you any options of a future. So even buried in this article is the truth of this kind of truth of this is like people get frustrated with this kind of stuff. You can break stuff and fuck shit up, but what do you get out of it? You know, besides free stuff, you're not getting stability. You're not getting results. But at the same time, this is what they see their destruction as a beacon, as a this is where we're in pain, we're suffering. Come do this, But it's at the same time, this is a tactic. This is not a political ideology.
Well, no, she said. LT Cancel said that it's got to be legit because somebody's got a selfie stick. So it's got to be legit, right? I think that's how that works.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Insurrectional anarchy brings diminishing returns, especially as anarchists complicate life for those working within a system to halt police violence. So this article kind of pits people against each other. It doesn't really explain like any ideology. It just explains kind of the violence of it all, like breaking stuff and affecting people's lives, and this where you can go to listen to this stuff if you want to listen to it.
And you know what they're doing too? And this is one of the things I really hate it.
The article it says the truth about today's anarchists, but this is not about anarchism. This is about something else.
But here's one of the things that really annoyed me when people try to introduce certain arguments in discussions.
Yeah,
is that their whole premise for their discussion is to take the outliers and then make them the mainstream when that's not even really the case, right?
Exactly.
So when people, for instance, when people talk about defunding the police, the vast majority of people who are reasonable are saying we need to take some of the funds that are going to turn each police department into mini militaries, and we need to put it into efforts so that the police don't need to be called as often.
Yeah.
But then there'll be one or two people that says we need to ask Elon Musk to put all the police officers on a spaceship and then fly them into an asteroid.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Right. You, right?
Yeah.
And then they'll say, well, everybody on the left, says blah, blah, blah. And then they'll say, well, Messiah Rhodes said, and it's like, but he's one person.
Yeah, I'm one person. I know and that's my feelings of it, but I know the reality is going to be, it's like steps. Right. It's steps.
But their whole argument, they'll use you to frame their entire argument and to paint over everybody.
Use one dude.
Yeah, and it's like, what do you think? Everybody has the same mind, the same brain? Like, he has his opinion, I have mine. Yeah. And my opinion should count for something, but it's too reasonable for it to be counted.
Yeah. So if you don't know anarchism, you read this article, you probably get more scared of it than understand it more, which is not good. So I want Phil to pop up this video real quick. It's kind of, you're gonna feel like you're in a class in college in first semester, but
Anarchism is a
It's the United
difficult
States.
ideology to
We need education
define.
around these days.
An anarchism of a sort was present in many movements and ideologies throughout history. From the Taoists in ancient China through to anarchism currently being practiced in Rojava in northern Syria, where communities are attempting to establish autonomous, bottom-up, direct democracies, where anyone can vote on any issue. Philosophy professor Nathan Jun defines anarchism as a universal condemnation of and opposition to all forms of closed, coercive authority, political, economical, social, etc., coupled with B, universal affirmation and promotion of freedom and equality in all spheres of human existence. For much of history, the term anarchism was, and for many still is, a derogatory term rather than the name of any movement or ideology. But towards the end of the 18th century, William Godwin began to define anarchism as an ideology for the first time. What is now referred to as classical anarchism was popularized across the course of the 19th century, when most terrorism in the world was also perpetrated by anarchists. King Umberto I of Italy, for example, was assassinated by an anarchist in 1900. At the height of the French Revolution in 1794, Godwin published an inquiry concerning political justice, which, while not using the term anarchism, is undoubtedly one of the first modern anarchist texts, and influenced the fathers of socialism and workers' movements like Robert Owen and poets like Percy Shelley. Influenced by John Locke's argument that the mind was a blank slate, Godwin argued that men were born equal and that differences were a product of their environment. Godwin was also a utilitarian. He believed that morality was a system of conduct which is determined by a consideration of the greatest general good. At the same time, he believed that man was perfectible, so that when these three principles were combined, the blank slate, the greatest good, and continual improvement, and as man became more educated and rational, they would become capable of governing themselves. Godwin argued that property accumulation was an evil that should be replaced by a kind of communism where each is entitled to their share of a common stock, and where communities that governed themselves face to face would replace nation states. A technological utopian, Godwin also believed that if everyone took a share of the workload and the innovations of the Industrial Revolution were justly put to use, work hours could be reduced to just half an hour.
Yeah, pause the video right quick.
Godwin was also a gradualist who believed that change would come through careful.
Yeah, so I want to make this point, and I've had these kinds of debates. I've had a debate with Messiah about capitalism, right? Probably one of our greatest discussions that I think we've ever had, where we were like really going at it and putting out a lot of ideas, right? But I've also had a lot of debates with people who claim that communism is the devil, right? Now, if you heard the explanation that the narrator just gave, he made it very clear that true communism, not the fake communism that you see in China or that you see in Russia,
where some dudes take over and save
right?
Communism.
right. True communism is you get in, you get back what you put in. So if you put in a day's work, nobody takes that from you. You know, the share that you put in is a share that you get out. That is true communism. So a lot of people say, oh, communists are bad. And, they went through the McCarthy era where, everybody was trying to sniff out the communists. Basically, if you were a real communist, you were saying, I worked hard today. I should get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. So I just wanted to put that out there for all the people, and it really gets really annoying that people start throwing out buzzword terms and they don't even know what they mean. What you're seeing in China is not communism. That's the same bullshit that we have over here. That's because where they move the money from the poor and they move it to the rich.
But that's
not communism.
We came out of a period when union organizers who study that stuff, and then the Red Scare wiping all these people out, and you say you're communist, you say you're American communist, and even though you can't go to your state building and do all kinds of state things, you know, you get ostracized. The Red Scare, even though it's like 50, 60 years later, we still have these scare words that people try to use against people, you know. But
also, look at that other thing that he talked about too, right? He said that part of the communists was your government was only as far as the people that you dealt with face to face. Is that what's happening in Russia? Is that what's happening in China? Fuck no. Beijing is the central government. They lord over everybody. They take insane taxes from everybody, right? That is not the same thing as your government is made up of whoever you deal with on a day-to-day basis in your particular geographical area.
You mean as in like if you're like, because like I know like in certain places like in China, like if you're a celebrity and you travel the world, allegedly the state gets a certain percentage of that because you're a part of you're a part of the state, you're part of the motherland, so you bring that assets back in a way.
Yeah, any kind of business you do in China, like if you like. But sell a company or something like that. Like the government is taking an insane
version of that. Where we go back to like, you know, Nixon time and Eisenhower time, and in America when millionaires were getting taxed like 70%,
70 to 90%. Yeah.
Yeah. So they weren't calling that communism or socialism at that time. You know, when we were like. That was like that's the time when Trump is saying "Make America Great Again." That's what he's thinking about. He's thinking about that 50s, 40s time.
And I don't even think he remember. I don't even think that he knows that.
Taxes for 80% for rich people. It's like
I know that's not that great America you're thinking of.
He's thinking about the Klan. He's thinking about women being in their place. That's what he's thinking about.
Right. Yeah.
So we can keep playing this video real quick.
Next came Max Stirner. Godwin died in 1836, and Max Stirner wrote his magnum opus, The Ego and Its Own, in 1844, where Godwin looked to cooperation and community as the essence of anarchism. Stirner argued for a radical individualism. Stirner was heavily influenced by Hegel's dialectics, the idea that progress occurs through the development of a thesis, antithesis, and synthesis that drives ideas and history, instead of progressing towards the state and embodiment of the community, though, as Hegel had argued. Stirner thought that the dialectic of history would progress towards a supreme individual freedom, where each man stood on his own moral footing. Stirner's system was supremely philosophically abstract, but his fundamental point was that we are all egoists. For Stirner, we do everything for
all white guys standing on the cliff watching the sunset.
Charitable, for example.
Isn't that like the premise of Dawson's Creek?
Benefit us in some way in the end. So morality came from the individual ego. The state then was superfluous, because we would be moral anyway to further our own individual interests. Laws and government then are an unjust restraint on the personal freedom of the ego. Stirner famously declared that I am everything to myself, and I do everything on my account. For Stirner, there are no rights, there is no transcendent morality. All of these are what he called spooks, invented by the powerful to oppress. I and I alone decide what is right and what is wrong. Stirner believed that instead of the state, people should band together in unions of egoists. Workers, for example, should band together and strike for better pay. The state, he argued, only gets in the way. Because we are roughly equal as humans, unions will balance each other out, leading to a kind of egoistic equilibrium. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon published What is Property in 1840, and it would become one of the most influential anarchist texts of the 19th century. His answer to the question, what is property, was the statement, property is theft. Proudhon argued that property that was the result of labour was legitimate, but property in unused land or property that's profit was a result of rent or interest.
Hey, Dublin, how you doing on Twitch?
He was involved in a dispute with Marx and deserves praise for his foresight that, and I quote, the doctrinaire, authoritarian, dictatorial, governmental, communist system is based on the principle that the individual is essentially subordinate to the collective, that from it alone he has his right in life, that the citizen belongs to the state like a child to the family, that he is in its power and possession, in manu, and that he owes it submission and obedience in all things.
See, this is when we go to like people standing in your bathroom watching you do stuff.
In the 20th century.
I only poop in there, so I'm not sure you want to watch that.
But that line leads to that kind of authoritarian,
regimented,
disaster,
indoctrinated, preached at, controlled, assessed, evaluated, censored, commanded. Proudhon believed instead in a bottom-up organized federation of communes, where the higher levels would be subordinated to the lower levels. This would be the very opposite of a centralized system. Instead of laws, Proudhon proposed contracts between people and groups. This was called mutualism. Another anarchist involved in a dispute with Marx was Mikhail Bakunin, maybe the most famous anarchist. Bakunin believed that justice was synonymous with equality, so that the freedom of each is therefore realizable only in the equality of all. Like Proudhon, Bakunin believed in the commune, which, while federated into larger units, would always retain the right to secede. His ideas of collectivist anarchism argued for equal means of subsistence, support, education, and opportunity for every child, boy or girl until maturity, and equal resources and facilities in adulthood to create his own well-being by his own labor.
That sounds more better than dictatorship.
Sounds like power to the people, right?
Exactly. Of the First International.
So New York City, by I guess federal government definition, is a power to the people municipality.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Trump is telling us. So
Bakunin argued that rather than state communism, workers' associations should themselves own the means of production. He argued that authority...
People want to be treated fairly and want to be the author of their own book and write their own destiny. That's a horrible place.
Boots, I refer to the authority of the bootmaker. Concerning houses, canals, or railroads, I consult that of the architect or engineer. But I allow neither the bootmaker nor the architect to impose his authority upon me.
Oh,
finally closing off the end of
that sounds pretty foreign. That sounds foreign.
It sounds like what most Americans would say today. Right?
Alexander II to world-renowned anarchist.
Is that an anarchist jurisdiction?
Communist anarchist. And a great...
Because I keep hearing about my freedoms! My freedom!
Published in 1902. Kropotkin spent much of his life challenging those who thought that Darwin's new theory of evolution as survival of the fittest justified racial and class hierarchy. He argued that rather
people
than
still do to this day, they still use that.
Prevailing of the dominant gene, mutual aid and cooperation within species were the defining factors of evolution. He argued that the phenomena of mutual aid and altruism, a kind of natural morality, existed biologically within humans, and so the state was an unnecessary protector of order. Kropotkin has much in common with someone like Rousseau, who argued that humans are inherently good-natured.
I don't know what that
live under the corrosive
primate was doing. I don't think I want to know.
Traveling the world and writing mutual aid. Kropotkin observed beetles helping each other carry and bury prey, too big for just one of them to eat, and ants who shared food and water if they passed another.
R.I.P. Spider.
Eagles that call on each other for aid and who let the elders...
F in the chat for that spider.
...for the young and the strongest. He saw packs and prides and schools in cooperation everywhere he looked. And Kropotkin also pointed to organizations like the English Lifeboat Association as an example of a voluntary organization that provides aid without the coercion, of the state. As well as mutual aid, Kropotkin wrote The Conquest Bread, which outlined his views on what an anarcho-communist society would look like. The book influenced anarchists in Catalonia during the Spanish Civil War, and anarchists today still in Rojava. These 5 thinkers provided a rough genesis of anarchist thought that would divide into separate but sometimes overlapping schools. During the 19th century, anarchists would generally either be communists or non-communists. Non-communists, mutualists like Proudhon, usually argued for individual property rights, but equal access to land and the means of production, and the abolishment of rent, profit, and taxation.
That's real sink or swim. That's real capitalism if you think about it.
Narco-communists, who would usually...
Hey, we'll give you everything you need. Everybody's on a fair playing field. And then whatever you do, it is what you get out of it.
Market exchange, and would distribute all property by need. In the 1905 entry for anarchism in the Encyclopaedia Britannica, Kropotkin noted that there were 6 main schools of anarchist thought: mutualist, individualist, collectivist, communist, Christian, and literary. Collectivists,
well, they had to add a religion in there. Okay.
That a federated system of collective communities would be in charge of the land and the means of production in its area. Kropotkin neglected to include anarcho-syndicalists, which, through unionization, would put all decisions in the hands of the workers.
Religions can be
would own the means of production
around for a little bit longer
in the decision-making process.
That include God and
Anarchism
Jesus.
has a rich and varied history,
and atheism and veganism.
In a short video, what I have sketched is just the beginnings of what is often now referred to as classical anarchism.
So that video was like, it felt really dense, but that's just brief. That was just like this, like you saw how it kind of evolved. They went from like this one guy in the early days to this guy finally saying it. Here's some examples I can talk about at the very end, but then boom.
And that goes to show that our politicians have no idea what real anarchism is. Like, there are people who are tired of injustice. They're anarchists. Really? Really? Is that really what an anarchist is?
There are people who want to give old ladies food in mom's diapers. Those are anarchists, you know, like, so pretty much there you go, mutual aid. So it also goes back to like during the pandemic, during the lockdown, if you would have saw like people collecting food outside of like kind of like, you know, the government, that's kind of mutual aid right there. That's kind of anarchist stuff right there. So,
you know, help from the people for the people.
Yeah, so in this New York Times article with this absurd, the truth about today's anarchists, and it's just about people breaking shit and being...
That is not anarchism. That is civil unrest. Not the same thing.
That's people being shot at and being tired of it, and then other people just going nuts. I mean, the anarchism is a whole ideology that you have to dig into and then meet fellow people and actually try to live it, you know, so day to day within this system. So that's why people like it so much. It's something you actually can kind of do now if you find your certain group of people. So, and grow it. And hopefully one day we'll all be part of it. So, follow us on Facebook and YouTube. We got 40,000 subscribers on act.tv. We're doing